Wisp Sports Radio, the voice of women in sport.
Hello and welcome. Thank you for downloading Soundbites on Wisp Sports. I'm your host, Dr. Kirstin Lauritzen, and this is Season 2, Episode 5. On today's show, we're going to be talking about fueling and your daily nutrition. Some of the biggest pieces and a foundation of you being an athlete and working out and all of that does come down to the foundation of nutrition. It's part of what, you can't really outwork a poor diet. So we're going to talk about what you can be doing throughout your day and then also around your workout so that you can really optimize that time you're spending. And a lot of people see the benefit, on the other side. So we're going to break all that down for you and let's get started. So this is something I like to start off with is you hear these words fueling and then you hear nutrition and you'll hear people say, oh, I'm working on my nutrition, and all that. And then they break it down into their macros and everything that kind of goes underneath that. But one of the things about working on nutrition that you've potentially heard over the last couple of episodes is that there's a lot more than just working on your macros, which is, carbs, fats, and proteins. Those are called your macros, macro molecules or macronutrition. The macronutrients. The fueling piece and the other piece of nutrition though is that there's micronutrients, right? There's your vitamins and then your minerals, and then there's a ton of enzymes and a lot of things that happen underneath the surface of that are basically your building blocks for everything that your body does. Whereas when I think about fueling is more about, okay, what do I need to be doing? What do I need to be eating? And what do I need to be optimizing around my workout and during my workout so that my body is able to perform at its absolute best? So we're going to break that down today. Most often I hear this question, when and how much do I eat? So what you're going to hear today as we go into this is when to eat is also going to funnel into how much to eat. So let's get started with just the before working out. What do you need to do there? One of the things that I think is I don't think people realize as much as I would assume is that 3 hours before your workout is when you really that's when you want to eat for your workout, 3 hours beforehand. A lot of people tend to eat larger meals or meals 1 to 1.5 hours before their workout. And the issue is that meal just is basically going to be sitting in your stomach. It's not actually going to be utilized as energy for your workout. It's the food that you consumed 3 to 4 hours ahead of time. So, and I will touch briefly on what happens if you work out first thing in the morning, but just keep in mind that if you're one of those kinds of people that works out in mid-morning or later in the day, you want to make sure that you're eating enough food and enough balance of the right foods 3 to 4 hours ahead of time, and just skip the meal 1 to 1.5 hours before your workout, because then it just kind of sits there and it won't do much for you. The other reason why you want to do this is definitely making sure you're getting enough carbs and protein, because this will help you use and store glycogen a little bit more efficiently as you go through your workout. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. What you also can do prior to your workout is your pre-workout time. So within 15 to 30 minutes before your workout, you can eat a small snack of a carb and then maybe take a pre-workout or a protein source like branched chain amino acid supplement right before you work out. What that's going to do, first off, the carb is going to be there for, that carb source is going to be there after you've utilized all of your body's already stored glycogen, and then it will be there when you get to maybe around an end of an hour, maybe headed into your second hour of working out. So something to keep in mind. It also will help you by eating that carb right before your workout versus an hour to an hour and a half before your workout, is that it will allow you to optimally use those muscle stores and not just create this big insulin response to eating a snack right a few hours beforehand. So the other thing too is, again, we'll talk about this in a bit too, and we've talked about it before, is just that protein, especially when you do it before your workout and then when you focus on afterwards, protein will be there to help you maximize the use of your fatty acids and be able to burn fat more efficiently, which is important for energy, but also just for overall health. During exercise, so that's your before working out. You want to eat 3 hours before your workout, and then you can do a small snack of a carb and protein before you go. And that can include your pre-workout if you want to if some of them have caffeine and other things in them too. Now, during exercise, this is going to depend on the workout. So for your longer exercise jaunts, we want to be focusing around 150 to 200 calories per hour, because you're going to utilize these calories a little bit more efficiently when you're training and when you're working out. So that then breaks down. So where do you get those calories from? And most people get them from foods or gels. One of the things that I would say is there's no right or wrong in this. Just keep in mind that food is sometimes a little bit better of an option. So if you can make bars, or if you can buy different types of bars that are more geared towards carbohydrates, those can be effective for at least getting you some carbs during your workout. Gels, though, they're these just super dense carbohydrate sources. And one of the problems with that is that when they get to the gut, for most people, but for everybody, that like they will draw water into the gut. It just doesn't necessarily mean a gnarly gut for everybody. But, when you hear people get just a digestive upset when they eat gels, well, what's happening is the gels are taking water from the body, and they're just essentially further dehydrating you as they go through. So just keep that in mind. Gels work for some, and they work in certain situations, but once you start taking them, you are going to be kind of on this train that you'll have to keep taking the gels as you go in order to keep your fuel up, because they do create a little bit of an insulin spike. For your shorter workouts, protein before, protein after. So protein before can be a branched chain amino acid supplement, especially for your strength training workouts, and then protein after. Within 30 minutes of your workout, you're going to hear this again. Making sure you're eating enough protein is going to be big for making sure that your body doesn't just break down muscle tissue, especially if you're trying to do a strength training workout. You want to be able to optimize that as much as possible and get the adaptations from that. If you're doing a shorter workout, like an hour CrossFit style workout or yoga or something like that, a small carb source before may be helpful, especially, for me, I know that if I eat 3 to 4 hours ahead of time, if I don't have anything in my stomach, I usually get hungry. So I like to eat like a banana or half a banana or something like that right before I go. And then the other thing is just to make sure that you stay hydrated during that workout, and then that protein shake or a protein source of any kind immediately after. So then the other piece of when we're trying to figure out how are we, fueling during our workouts, we've touched on it already, proteins versus carbs, right? Branched chain amino acids are proteins. They're amino acids that of a wide variety that help you basically to utilize and optimize fat burning. For women, this is particularly important because you do tend to optimize fat burning during your workouts more than men. And also, you have about 3 hours after your workout where you are still going to be burning fat more efficiently. And that protein source helps you to do that. So taking a branched chain amino acid supplement beforehand can be really helpful in just optimizing that situation. The other piece though is then carbohydrates. So carbohydrates are basically glucose. And what the body does is it turns it into glycogen, and it stores it in the muscles and the liver. You have about 10 grams or so of glycogen per kilogram of muscle tissue. So in around like a 140-pound woman, there's about 630 grams of glycogen just in your muscle tissue. And this builds up over time. So again, when I talked about earlier, fueling and making sure you're eating enough throughout your day helps you to actually build up carbs over time, like this glycogen over time into your muscles. And that's what ultimately gets you to that race day. And you don't, do the carb load right before the night before your workout. It's how you fueled and how you've worked out over the period of time of your entire training season that builds all that glycogen up in your tissue so that you have it on race day. And then you also have 40 to 45 grams of glycogen stored in your liver. And that's enough really to fuel a few hours of exercise. So just keep that in mind. That doesn't mean that you don't want to eat any carbs or consume any carbs as you go through your workout, because as you use them, if you have them coming in, it's going to help you replenish those and store them. But just something to keep in mind is that you'll use your liver and your muscle glycogen stores first, and then it will go to whatever you have that you've consumed. Okay. So and then the other piece to remember is that the harder that you go, the faster those carbs are going to leave your system. So for example, a yoga workout and an hour of yoga is probably not going to deplete your stores quite as quickly as doing 400-meter sprints. So just know kind of the difference between what type of workout you're doing at that current day. And it's also, again, kind of going back to, it's also how you feel right around these workouts that helps you to rebuild those glycogen stores. So remember that, it is going to depend a bit on what you're doing, but we don't need to be taking in tons and tons of gels and carbs and things like that in lower VO2 max capacity, workouts like yoga. But your sprints and harder workouts and longer workouts are definitely going to be the ones where you want to make sure that you're fueling properly as you go. The other thing to remember too is that your brain alone uses about 60% of your resting glucose utilization. So what that basically means is that your brain uses so many carbs on a daily basis. Like throughout your day, your brain is taking in so many of those carbohydrates and that glucose and using it. So it's good to keep in mind, especially because when we get into those longer workouts, where some of you are potentially working out 2 to 3 hours and racing multiple hours, your brain's going to be utilizing a lot of that. And so to keep a good focus and to keep a clear mind and be, on top of it, making sure you're getting enough carbohydrates and that type of fuel is extremely imperative. So keep that in mind. And that's really the basics of fueling for during exercise. It's just keeping track of your proteins and your carbohydrates for the most part, and understanding what they're doing in your body so that you can optimize and choose appropriately what you need for the different type of workout. And post-exercise, your fueling is going to look something like this. This is probably one of the most important things, but within 30 minutes, you need to be consuming some type of protein or just meal in general. A protein shake is the most efficient for most people, but having a meal prepped with some chicken and then maybe another carbohydrate, like a sweet potato and then some broccoli, like that could be really, and maybe even just a small bit of avocado for a little bit more fat. That gives you so much nutrition in that post-exercise meal that helps you really, first off, to stay in that fat burning state for women. But also, if you don't eat enough protein, your body really won't refuel its muscle stores with the carbohydrates that you just used and consumed, prior to your workout and during your workout. Instead, what will happen is if you aren't consuming enough protein, it will actually use the carbohydrates to assist in recovery, repairing your muscles, not taking those carbs and storing them and using the protein to rebuild your muscles. So getting this right is important. So again, if you hear people saying, please make sure you're eating enough after your workout and getting protein in, that's why. They really want you to be using and utilizing what you're consuming so that your body actually builds those muscle stores up. Okay, and then the last piece in this is all day. So what do you do all day? Stay hydrated all day long is probably one of the biggest things you can be doing. Your body is 60% made up of water, and dehydrated tissues essentially just leads to poor performance and overall health. So drinking enough water is important, and most adults usually don't do that. In general, what you've probably heard already, and this still, for the most part remains true, is that half your body weight in ounces every day in water, straight water, is ideal. Not any other mineral waters or anything like that, straight water. And if you can get it filtered, that would be even better. And then during exercise, you're looking at about 16 to 25 ounces of water during your exercise, maybe a little bit more if it's a little bit hot out. But And then if you didn't listen to some of the previous episodes, I recommend going back to them, because I talked about making sure that you're getting enough salt if you are going to be working out in hot weather, and if you're in that later half of your cycle, if you're a menstruating female. Something to think about is that you may want to preload with some salt to help you actually thermoregulate and manage your temperature a little bit easier and better on those really hot, long workouts. Okay. And then the other thing that you also want to do during the day is is making sure that you're getting enough protein. So in general, like general guidelines are around 0.8 to 1 gram of protein per kilogram of body weight. I know that's kind of like a monster to think about, but if you are, just working out just in general, it's part of your training. This is kind of your everyday 1 hour or so is your normal. About 1 gram of protein per kilogram of your body weight would be fine. Now, if you're doing like more endurance workouts and you're doing more like 2 hours of working out a day, of training a day, you might want to be leaning towards more 1.5 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. If you're a CrossFitter, a strength trainer, Olympic lifter, if you're doing just a lot of just heavy weight, or for example, some of you endurance athletes or athletes in any realm, if you are doing any type of strength training that day, you might want to think about getting more like 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day. The last piece is then, what do you do about carbohydrates in your whole day? In general, like most guidelines will say somewhere around 40 to 45% of your daily total calories, right, may need to be from carbs. This may be less if you don't tolerate carbs well. And I know you know who you are. I will have patients come into my office and they'll say, I just can't eat oatmeal. I gained 2 pounds like in a day. So you know who you are. If you don't tolerate carbs very well, this may need to be lowered a little bit for you. And in that case, you'll want to be eating a little bit more protein. This is the same for postmenopausal women as well. Eating slightly more protein and just slightly less carbohydrates is going to benefit you quite a bit. But this is where this comes down to your unique what needs and what you need, right? So just keep that in mind. Most people are not eating enough protein. Most women are not eating enough protein, and they're definitely not eating enough carbohydrates because we're scared of carbohydrates because they're supposed to, they may make us fat. So just keep that in mind, okay? Carbohydrates are definitely needed, and you need them in order to store, to build up those glycogen stores in your muscles and your liver. So protein is your friend. Carbohydrates you don't need to be as afraid of them. You can get really good healthy sources through sweet potatoes, through zucchini, and those starchy type of veggies like beets. You can do whole grains from, red rice and black rice and whole wild rice, quinoa. There's and even oatmeal. There's a lot of different options there as far as really great dense carbs that that aren't your refined carbohydrates. So that is the down and dirty basics of nutrition and fueling all day, putting all of these pieces together that we've sort of talked about over the last couple of episodes. So that is really our episode for now. So you'll be able to see links to the references on wispsports.com. Please make sure to follow Wisp Sports on all social media channels, and make sure to share this episode with anyone you think may love it. You can also follow me at Dr. Kirstin, that's DrKirstin, on Facebook and Instagram, and you can also find me at drkirstin.com. If you'd like to reach us with any comments or questions about this episode, you can at info@wispsports.com. And you can always leave a direct message with us over on social media as well. Thank you for listening, and I'll be back in a few weeks on the next episode.